Welcome to Socrates Beyond Time, a place where I share stories inspired by the thought-provoking spirit of the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates through slow, deep, and contemplative dialogues. In the series Socrates and the Masters of Persuasion, Socrates journeys across time to meet influential figures throughout history, engaging them in conversations that explore the true nature of persuasion, not merely as a technique, but as a way human beings connect with one another. Though these encounters are fictional, the spirit of Socrates and the insights revealed in each dialogue carry a timeless value, inviting us to reflect on how we think, speak, and influence others. If you'd like to explore this journey more deeply, you're warmly invited to visit socratesbeyondtime.blogspot.com, where these reflections continue, quietly yet meaningfully. There are encounters that do not seek truth, but test its very meaning. When Socrates faces Gorgias, representing the Sophists, the dialogue is no longer a journey toward truth, but a tension between truth and the power of speech. One believes that words must serve the truth. One understands that words can create truth in the mind of the listener. Between them lies not merely a difference in persuasion, but a deeper question. If something sounds true, is it truly so? Athens, 5th century BCE. Democracy was still young, yet the agora had already become a battlefield of words. Power no longer rested only in the hands of generals or nobles. It rested in the ears of the crowd. This new order opened an unprecedented opportunity. Whoever knew how to speak could lead the city. Whoever knew how to turn an argument could win lawsuits, win votes, win honor. Truth was no longer the only thing being sought. Victory had become a more practical measure. Within that atmosphere, men who called themselves teachers of wisdom appeared. They did not promise eternal truth. They promised skill, the skill of turning weak arguments into strong ones, the skill of making the crowd lean toward your side. What made them distinctive was not contempt for truth, but the choice to place effectiveness before truth. At the center of the square, a speaker raised his voice. His tone was sharp like a carefully sharpened blade. His arguments curved, reversed direction, and struck back at the very premises of his opponent. The crowd erupted, not because what they heard was true, but because it was beautiful, quick, difficult to refute. Every sentence was a performance. Every victory was proof of technique. And when the young men left the square, they did not ask what they had learned that was right. They asked how they could speak better next time. A quiet shift was taking place. Speech was separating itself from the task of seeking truth. It was becoming a pure instrument, something that could be used to build or to bend.
You speak very well.
Gorgias raised his head, confident.
How well, sir?
Well enough to make the listener forget what he was searching for.
You search for truth. I help people win. In this life, which is more useful?
Socrates looked around the square. The young men were still excited, their eyes shining as if they had just watched a contest.
Win? Against whom?
Against opponents, against the crowd, in courts, assemblies, and markets. Words are weapons, and I teach how to use them.
So you teach how to use weapons, but not how to distinguish when they should be used and when they should be laid down?
Gorgias shrugged.
Morality is the concern of the one who holds the weapon, not of the blacksmith.
A few people nodded in approval. Socrates was silent for a long time. Then he asked slowly,
If a man uses words to make the crowd believe something false and he wins, would you call that success?
I would call that skill properly applied.
Then if a physician persuades a patient to drink poison simply because he speaks more eloquently, where does the fault lie?
Gorgias paused slightly, but very quickly he smiled.
You are mixing two different things. One is speaking well. The other is living rightly. I only teach the first.
Socrates nodded.
I understand. You teach people to make the weak appear strong, to make the false appear true.
You teach them persuasion. As for truth and falsehood, who decides?
Socrates looked directly into Gorgias's eyes.
If no one decides what is true or false, then speech will no longer guide. It will only entice.
A hot wind passed through the square. Dust lifted lightly. The crowd began to grow quieter.
What do you fear, Socrates?
I fear a generation that knows how to win every argument, but no longer knows what it is defending.
Gorgias did not answer immediately. He looked toward his students, young faces, sharp and confident.
The world does not reward those who seek truth, Socrates. It rewards those who persuade others.
Socrates smiled faintly, sadly.
Perhaps, but a city built upon victorious speeches without truth to support them will collapse very quickly.
He turned and walked away. Behind him, voices rose again. New debates began. But a few young men did not join immediately. They stood still, asking themselves for the first time, and Socrates knew that this conversation, though it earned no applause, was the most dangerous thing for the Sophists. Many years later, Athens was still there. The square was still noisy. New speakers continued to appear, each carrying a style sharper than the last. Technique continued to be refined. Arguments grew increasingly sophisticated. Young people learned how to speak before they learned how to think. And eventually, that very city condemned Socrates, not because he spoke poorly, but because he refused to speak in ways that pleased the crowd. In that fateful trial, the art of persuasion stood on one side. The search for truth stood on the other. The crowd made its decision. History made another. Speeches that once shook the square are now only quotations in academic books. But Socrates' question, "What is true?" has never grown old. The Sophists proved something important. Speech can separate from truth and still function smoothly. Socrates proved something more dangerous. When speech remains separated from truth for long enough, a society slowly loses the ability to recognize that separation. Pure persuasion is a tool. Like a blade, it does not decide whether it cuts bread or cuts into the moral foundations of a community. That conversation long ago did not end with victory. It ended with a divergence. One path leads toward ever more effective influence. Another leads toward ever deeper self-questioning. Since then, humanity has never stopped wavering between two choices. Do we want to speak so that others will believe, or do we want to seek what is truly worth believing? And every age, whether it admits it or not, must answer that question again.